Sometimes, healing a family doesn't require a miracle. It only takes one person with the courage to forgive, the strength to let go, and the love to rebuild. Amelia Reynolds once had everything she could have wanted: 2 beautiful children, a thriving business, a home filled with laughter. But in just a few short years, that all began to unravel. Her family, once inseparable, now felt like strangers to each other. Her son, Ethan, had become distant, his ambitions and friendships pulling him farther away from home. Her daughter, Sophie, was angry at everything, at everyone. Even the most ordinary moments now felt heavy, filled with unspoken words and unshed tears. But what would you do if you were the one left holding everything together? Would you fight to mend what seemed lost? Or would you accept that some things are simply beyond repair? Amelia found herself standing at the edge of a choice: to give up or to take the hardest step of all, reaching out and healing the broken pieces of her family. What happened next would change everything. Stay with us as we tell you the story of how one woman fought to heal the hearts of the people she loved most, and how her journey led to an unexpected revelation about what it truly means to be a family. Can love really repair what time has broken? Let's find out together. Amelia Reynolds had always been the glue that held her family together. As a young woman, she had married her high school sweetheart, James, a quiet, thoughtful man with big dreams and a heart full of ambition. Together, they built a life that others could only dream of. A beautiful home nestled on the outskirts of town, a successful family business that James had started from scratch, and 2 children who were the center of their world. Ethan, their firstborn, had always been the pride of the family. From a young age, he was bright, curious, and driven. He excelled in school, made friends easily, and seemed destined for greatness. Sophie, their second child, was a little more reserved, but no less loved. Amelia often found herself marveling at Sophie's kindness, her ability to empathize with others, even when she struggled with her own emotions. Amelia and James poured their hearts into raising their children, teaching them the values of hard work, respect, and family loyalty. The Reynolds family was more than just a name. It was a legacy. Amelia was the steady presence that balanced James's quiet determination. They worked together, side by side, to create a family that embodied everything they believed in. But life, as it often does, has a way of changing everything. As the years passed, Ethan grew more independent, spending less time at home. At first, it was just small moments, weekends out with friends, later hours at work. But soon, it was entire days, then weeks, without a word. He seemed consumed by his ambitions, lost in a world that didn't include his family. Sophie, too, began to change. The once gentle, thoughtful girl now seemed perpetually angry, her thoughts and emotions turning inward. Amelia tried to understand her daughter's silence, but it only pushed them further apart. What had happened to the family they once were? The Reynolds home, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt cold and empty. The walls that had witnessed so many happy moments now stood silent, watching as the distance between mother and children grew with every passing day. It wasn't long before Amelia began to fear the truth. The truth that, no matter how hard she tried, her family was falling apart, and all she could do was watch. In the quiet of the night, she would sit alone in the kitchen, her thoughts consumed by the same question: how had it all gone wrong? Little did she know that this was only the beginning of the journey that would force her to confront her deepest fears, and ultimately discover a power within herself that would change the course of their lives forever. The family that she thought was lost had yet to reveal its true strength. But for now, Amelia was holding on, hoping, praying for the chance to heal the wounds she couldn't even fully understand. The tension in the Reynolds household began to simmer long before it boiled over. At first, it was easy to ignore. Just a few offhand remarks, a cold silence during dinner, and moments when the once cheerful chatter was replaced with awkward pauses. But soon, those small cracks became impossible to overlook. Amelia had always been a mother who believed in the power of communication. She had spent years nurturing her children, guiding them through their lives with patience and love. But as Ethan's world seemed to grow further away from the family and Sophie's anger became sharper, Amelia found herself unable to reach them. The harder she tried, the more they pulled away. It started with Sophie. One evening, after a long day at work, Amelia walked into the kitchen to find Sophie sitting at the table, her arms crossed, her eyes avoiding hers. Amelia's heart sank as she noticed the coldness in her daughter's gaze, an ice wall that had slowly built up over the years. "Sophie, we need to talk," Amelia said gently, pulling out a chair and sitting across from her. Sophie's lips tightened. "I don't think there's anything left to talk about, Mom." The words hit Amelia like a punch to the gut. She tried to keep her voice steady, fighting the frustration building inside her. "I just want to understand. What's going on with you? You've been so distant lately." Sophie looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and confusion. "You never listen. You never really see me. It's always about Ethan or the business. You don't get it." Amelia's breath caught in her chest. She hadn't realized how much Sophie had been suffering in silence, feeling overlooked in the chaos of their lives. But before she could respond, Sophie stood up, throwing her hands up in exasperation. "I'm not talking about this right now." And with that, she stormed out of the room, leaving Amelia alone with the weight of her daughter's words. The confrontation with Sophie was just the beginning. Amelia's attempts to bridge the gap only seemed to widen it. Every word she spoke felt like it fell on deaf ears, and every effort to understand Sophie only pushed her further away. And then there was Ethan, the once loving son who had filled the house with laughter and dreams, had grown distant, and now it seemed like his only connection to his family was an occasional text or brief phone call. He had been accepted into a prestigious law school out of state, and Amelia had hoped this would bring them closer, that they could spend more time together before he left. But it only made the distance between them feel more pronounced. One evening, after a brief conversation over dinner, Ethan stood up and grabbed his jacket. "I'm heading out with some friends. I'll see you guys later." "Wait," Amelia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can't we talk?" "Before you go?" Ethan paused, his hand on the door handle, his face unreadable. "About what, Mom? You know I'm busy." Without another word, he walked out, leaving Amelia with a sinking feeling in her chest. It wasn't just the silence, the distance. It was the feeling of being ignored. The children she had loved and raised, the ones who once leaned on her for support and guidance, now seemed to have no place for her in their lives. Amelia's heart broke every time she tried to reach out and was met with resistance or indifference. Her family, once so close-knit, was becoming a shell of what it had been. The business that had once been a shared dream between her and James seemed to dominate her life, and now it felt like it was the only thing she had left that was truly hers. But even that, she realized, was slipping away. Amelia had spent so much time keeping the business running, managing the staff, handling the finances, that she had neglected the very thing that mattered most, her family. It was a bitter realization that gnawed at her every day. She had poured her heart into the business, built it into something successful, but in the process, had she lost the one thing she couldn't rebuild with money or status? Her family? Sitting in the stillness of the house, Amelia began to question everything she had believed about herself as a mother. Had she failed her children? Had she been too focused on providing for them, on giving them everything they wanted, that she had neglected what they truly needed? As the days went by, the tension between them continued to rise. The silent dinners, the hollow exchanges, the sense that something was broken but no one knew how to fix it. Amelia found herself standing at the edge of a cliff, not knowing if the family she had fought so hard to build could ever be put back together again. The love she had given seemed to have fallen on deaf ears, and she wondered, was it too late to save them? But something inside her refused to give up. There had to be a way, she told herself. There had to be a way to bring them back together, if only she could find the right words, the right actions, the right moment. But time, she feared, was running out. The road to healing wasn't clear, but for Amelia, it was the only road left to take. Amelia had always been the strong one, the steady foundation of her family. But lately, that strength felt like it was slipping away, like sand through her fingers. Every morning, she woke up with a heavy heart, knowing that the family she had spent her entire life nurturing was slowly crumbling, piece by piece. There were days when she could barely get out of bed, the weight of everything pressing down on her. She had spent years building this life, this family, and yet here she was, staring at the wreckage of what it had become. Her children, once so full of love and laughter, were now strangers to her, and the silence in the house was deafening. Amelia had always been someone who solved problems. It was her nature. When her husband James was alive, they worked together to overcome obstacles, to find solutions. But now, as she stood alone, she found herself trapped in a situation where there were no easy answers. The harder she tried to fix things, the more everything seemed to fall apart. She found herself questioning everything she had done. Had I pushed them too hard? Was I too focused on the business? Did they feel like they were never good enough for me? The guilt gnawed at her. She had spent so much time building a successful company, providing for her family, but in the process, had she missed the most important thing? Had she failed her children when they needed her most? These thoughts swirled around in her mind, leaving her feeling empty and lost. One night, after another failed attempt to get Sophie to open up, Amelia sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the framed picture of her family. It was from years ago, a time when everything felt right. She remembered the laughter, the family vacations, the moments when the bond between them seemed unbreakable. But that seemed so distant now. The family she had once known was gone, and she didn't know how to bring it back. As she stared at the photo, her phone buzzed on the bedside table. It was a message from Ethan. "I'll be home late tonight. Don't wait up." The words stung. They were just words, just a simple text, but they carried with them a weight of indifference. She had long ago stopped expecting meaningful conversations from him. He was always too busy, always too distant. The boy she had raised with love and care had become a shadow of the person she once knew. And the worst part was, she didn't know how to reach him anymore. Amelia sank back onto the bed, her head in her hands. For the first time in a long while, she felt utterly defeated. She had tried everything: patience, understanding, love, but nothing seemed to break through. The family she had built from the ground up now felt like a house of cards, teetering on the edge of collapse. Tears welled up in her eyes, not just from frustration, but from a deeper pain. The pain of realizing that no matter how much she loved them, no matter how much she wanted to make things right, her children were choosing their own paths, and those paths no longer included her. She felt powerless. She tried to push the tears away, but they kept coming, relentless. She had been holding everything together for so long, but now she was at her breaking point. She had spent years building a life for her children, but now she was watching that life unravel in front of her eyes. In the quiet of the night, she asked herself, Was she losing them forever? Had she failed as a mother? She couldn't stop the thoughts from consuming her, and just as the weight of the world seemed too much to bear, a thought struck her. Maybe the answer wasn't in trying to fix everything on her own. Maybe it was about letting go. Maybe it was time to stop fighting and start forgiving. But even as the thought lingered, Amelia wasn't sure she was ready. How could she forgive herself for not being there when they needed her most? How could she forgive Ethan and Sophie for the distance they had put between them? She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. The world outside seemed so far away from the turmoil inside her home. The city lights blinked in the distance, but everything felt so empty, so lonely. And that's when it hit her. She couldn't keep holding everything inside. If she didn't find a way to heal her own heart, she couldn't expect her children to heal theirs. She had to make a choice. She had to take the first step, not just for her family, but for herself. As the tears finally stopped, Amelia wiped her eyes and made a silent vow. She didn't know how she would do it, but she would find a way to heal. Not just for her children, but for the woman who had lost herself in the process of holding it all together. In that moment, something inside her began to shift. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. She couldn't keep waiting for a miracle to happen. She had to be the one to create it. The breaking point wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something new. And no matter how hard it was, Amelia was ready to find out what that something was. Amelia sat quietly in the stillness of her home, the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her. It was late, and the house was eerily quiet, just the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick of the clock on the wall. She had spent so many nights in this same silence, but tonight was different. Tonight, something inside her had shifted. She had always been a woman of action, someone who solved problems with her determination. But after weeks of fruitless attempts to fix things with her children, Amelia began to realize something she hadn't before. She wasn't just trying to fix her family, she was trying to fix herself. The guilt that had consumed her for so long was starting to lift, slowly, like a cloud breaking after a storm. For the first time in months, Amelia allowed herself to sit with the truth. She didn't need to fix everything. She needed to heal. As she sat there, reflecting on the path that had led her here, Amelia's mind drifted to her late husband, James, the man who had been her partner in every sense of the word, the one who had believed in family above all else. She remembered the late nights they spent talking, planning for their future and their children's. She remembered how, despite the challenges they faced, they always put their family first. James had always been the quiet one, the thinker. He had believed in the power of patience and understanding, and it was those same qualities that had made their marriage so strong, that had made their family so unbreakable. Amelia found herself reaching for an old box that sat on the shelf above her desk. It was filled with memories, letters, photos, mementos from years past. She ran her fingers over a well-worn letter that James had written to her after their first child, Ethan, was born. It was filled with words of love and hope and the promise of a bright future. As she read the letter again, one line caught her eye. Family isn't about perfection. It's about understanding, even when you don't have all the answers. Those words echoed in her mind. Understanding, even when you don't have all the answers. Amelia felt a pang in her chest as she realized the truth behind those words. For so long, she had tried to have all the answers. She had tried to fix everything, to solve every problem. But the truth was, no one had all the answers, not even her. Amelia's journey to heal her family wasn't about fixing them. It was about understanding them, understanding their pain, understanding their choices, and most importantly, understanding that healing didn't happen overnight. For the first time, She allowed herself to feel the weight of her own imperfections. She wasn't perfect, and neither were her children, but that didn't mean they couldn't come together again. She stood up, walking to the window, the soft moonlight casting a gentle glow across the yard. Amelia knew that she couldn't change the past, the arguments, the misunderstandings, the missed moments. Those things were already written in the story of their family. But what mattered now, what truly mattered, was what she did next. She could keep waiting for them to come to her, or she could take the first step. Her mind was made up. She wouldn't keep waiting for the right words to magically appear, or for the perfect moment to show up. She would take action. But this time, it would be different. This time, she would lead with empathy, with understanding, and with love. Amelia thought about Sophie, how her anger had built up over the years, how it was so easy to dismiss her feelings as childish or unreasonable. And Ethan, how his distance was not a rejection of her, but a reflection of his own struggles that he didn't know how to share. She realized that her children weren't rejecting her, they were hurting. And in that moment, Amelia understood the most important thing of all. Healing begins with understanding, not with fixing. She didn't need to have all the answers. She just needed to listen. She needed to reach out without an agenda. No lectures, no demands. Just an open heart and the willingness to be there, without expectations. Amelia knew this wouldn't be easy. She knew it would take time. But for the first time in a long while, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Hope that, with patience and understanding, her family could be healed, that the cracks in their relationships could be filled with love, not force. She turned away from the window and walked back to her desk. The phone was still there, sitting quietly, waiting. This time, Amelia picked it up with a clear sense of purpose. She wasn't waiting for a miracle anymore. She was going to create one, step by step, with every conversation, every act of kindness, and every moment of patience. She called Sophie first. She wasn't sure what she was going to say, but she knew it had to start somewhere. "Sophie, it's Mom," she said, her voice gentle but steady. "I've been thinking a lot about us lately, and I think it's time we really talk." The phone was quiet for a moment, but Amelia didn't mind. She was ready. It was a beginning, and that was all that mattered. The road ahead wasn't clear, but one thing was certain. Amelia was no longer waiting for her family to come back to her. She was going to meet them where they were, and together they would find their way back to each other. It had been a few weeks since Amelia's moment of realization, the quiet night when she understood that healing her family required understanding, not fixing. Since then, her approach had changed. Instead of pushing, instead of demanding answers, she simply showed up for her children. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of silence, still times when the distance between them felt unbearable. But something had shifted, and slowly, ever so slowly, her efforts began to bear fruit. One evening, after dinner, Amelia sat in the living room, waiting for Ethan and Sophie to join her. The house was quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that made everything feel more significant, like each moment counted. The tension from before still lingered, but this time it was different. This time there was a sense of possibility in the air. Ethan had come home earlier than expected. He was quiet, distant as usual, but there was a tiredness in his eyes that wasn't there before. Amelia had learned not to press him, not to force a conversation. She simply greeted him, asked about his day, and let him speak when he was ready. Sophie, on the other hand, had spent most of her evenings holed up in her room, retreating further into herself. But today, something had changed. She had left her room earlier, just long enough to make herself a cup of tea. Amelia had said nothing, just smiled softly and continued with her tasks, letting Sophie make the first move. And now, as the minutes ticked by, Amelia found herself reflecting on how far they had come in such a short time. Yes, it was still hard. Yes, the wounds from the past hadn't completely healed, but the walls were coming down, bit by bit, and that was enough for now. Ethan entered the room first, looking at her cautiously. Amelia smiled at him, her heart in her throat. "Hey, Ethan," she said softly, patting the seat next to her. "How was your day?" Ethan sat down, his usual guarded expression softened. "It was okay. Work was busy, just, the usual." Amelia nodded, letting him speak in his own time. There were no demands here, just space. And then Sophie walked in. She stood at the doorway for a moment, looking uncertain, as if she wasn't sure if she should join them. But when Amelia met her gaze and smiled, Sophie hesitated for just a second before walking over and sitting down next to her brother. The three of them were together again. No fighting, no walls, just the quiet presence of one another. Amelia looked at her children, her heart full of a love she had almost forgotten was there, buried beneath the frustration, the misunderstandings and the silence. It was still fragile, this new connection they had started to rebuild, but it was real. "I've been thinking," Amelia began softly, her voice steady, "about everything, about us, and I just want to say, I'm sorry for not always being there when you needed me, for not listening, for getting caught up in everything else." Sophie shifted uncomfortably, but didn't say anything. Ethan's gaze remained fixed on his hands, but there was something different about him now. He was no longer angry, just tired. Amelia continued, her voice breaking slightly as she spoke from her heart. "I know I can't fix everything. I can't take back the mistakes I made, but I want to try. I want to be the mother you both need, the one who listens, the one who sees you." Ethan's eyes flicked up to hers for a brief moment, and Amelia saw something there she hadn't seen in a long time: vulnerability. "Mom," he started, his voice hoarse, but he didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he reached for Sophie's hand, a silent but powerful gesture of connection. Sophie looked down at their joined hands, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. But then, she squeezed his hand tightly, as if she had been waiting for him to reach out. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she turned to Amelia. "I don't know how to fix everything," Sophie said quietly, "but I want to try too." And in that moment, Amelia felt the weight of the years of hurt, of the distance, of the silence, all start to lift. This wasn't a perfect solution, and it wouldn't be an easy road ahead, but this was their first real step towards healing, a step they were all willing to take together. Amelia reached out, pulling both of her children into a hug. For the first time in what felt like years, they all held each other, not out of obligation or guilt, but out of love. It wasn't perfect, it was messy, it was painful, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, Amelia believed that things could be better. "Thank you," she whispered into their hair, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for giving me another chance. Thank you for letting me be your mom again." The three of them sat there, wrapped in a quiet embrace, the unspoken understanding between them stronger than any words could express. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was a beginning, a new chapter. And Amelia knew, deep down, that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about moving forward, together. It was about love, forgiveness, and the willingness to rebuild, no matter how broken things seemed. As they pulled away, there was a quiet peace in the room, a peace that had been missing for far too long. Amelia looked at her children, their faces soft with emotion, and smiled. "We're going to be okay," she said, her voice filled with quiet certainty. And in that moment, they all knew it was true. The days following that pivotal moment were not easy, but they were filled with hope. The house, once cold with silence, began to hum with life again. Amelia could feel it in the air. the subtle shift, the quiet understanding that change had begun. But this time, it wasn't just her who was making the effort. Ethan and Sophie were too. For the first time in years, Amelia found herself truly listening, not just to their words, but to their hearts. Ethan had begun to come home more often, staying longer during meals, joining in conversations instead of retreating into his world. His once guarded demeanor had softened, and while there was still a distance between them, it no longer felt like an impenetrable wall. They shared moments, small moments of connection, like when he helped her fix a leaky faucet one afternoon without being asked, or when they sat together quietly after dinner, just existing in the same space, without the tension. Sophie, too, began to open up in ways she hadn't before. She had always been the more introverted of the two, hiding her emotions behind a mask of defiance and rebellion. But now, she started to seek out Amelia more, asking for advice on everything from her personal struggles to what her mother thought about certain things. Amelia noticed the subtle change, the way Sophie would sit beside her, their hands occasionally brushing, the unspoken bond growing stronger with every passing day. There were still difficult conversations, old wounds that had to be addressed, painful truths that needed to be spoken. But these conversations no longer felt like attacks. Instead, they felt like opportunities for healing. For the first time in months, Amelia saw her children not as distant strangers, but as the people they used to be. The people she had raised, the people she had always loved. And the business, the thing that had consumed so much of her time, it too began to find its balance once more. Amelia realized that in her pursuit of success, she had neglected the most important thing of all, the people who mattered most. So, she made a conscious decision. She would no longer let the business consume her. She would delegate more, step back, and make time for her family. The balance she had been craving for so long was finally within reach. One evening, after dinner, the three of them sat together in the living room, Amelia, Ethan, and Sophie. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic moment. It was just a quiet evening, the kind they used to have before everything had fallen apart. But this time, it felt different. This time, it felt like the beginning of something new. "Mom," Ethan began, his voice softer than usual, "I've been thinking about a lot of things, and I just want to say, I'm sorry for the way I've been. I've taken you for granted." Amelia's heart swelled with emotion. She had never expected an apology from him, but the sincerity in his voice told her everything she needed to know. They were healing. They were both healing. Sophie, who had been silent up until this point, looked at her brother, then at Amelia. "I'm sorry too, Mom. I know I've been difficult. I didn't know how to talk about what I was feeling, but I'm ready to try." Amelia felt the sting of tears in her eyes, but this time, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of love, of gratitude. She had feared that they would never get to this point, that the rift between them would be too wide to ever bridge. But here they were, together, ready to move forward. "I love you both so much," Amelia said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how we got here, but I'm so proud of us for making it through. This is a new beginning for all of us." The air in the room felt lighter, freer, as if a burden had been lifted. They were no longer trapped in the past, no longer held captive by old wounds and regrets. There was still work to be done, of course. Healing didn't happen overnight, but this was the first step toward rebuilding what had once seemed lost. As the evening wore on, Amelia sat back and let herself fully embrace the peace that had settled into her heart. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't holding her breath, waiting for the next argument or silence. She was simply present, enjoying the quiet moments, the shared laughter, the gentle connection that now defined their family. In the weeks that followed, things weren't perfect. There were still moments of tension, moments when old habits crept back in. But Amelia knew, deep down, that they had crossed a threshold. They had faced their struggles head-on, and now they were stronger, together. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: they would face it together, as a family, and that, Amelia realized, was all that mattered. She smiled softly, watching as Ethan and Sophie exchanged a quiet laugh, their bond strengthening with each passing day. She had not only found her family again, but she had also found herself, rediscovered the woman who had once believed in love, in patience, and in the power of second chances. The road ahead would not always be easy, but it was theirs to walk, together, and that was enough. As Amelia watched her children, a quiet certainty filled her heart. This was just the beginning. As Amelia sat back, watching her children, she realized something she hadn't understood before. Healing doesn't happen through force, control, or perfection. It happens through patience, understanding, and the willingness to meet each other where we are. For so long, she had tried to fix the broken pieces of her family by focusing on the wrong things, on what she could do, how she could change things, how she could force the family back together. But what she discovered was that the key wasn't in fixing the brokenness. The key was in acknowledging it, accepting it, and being open to the possibility that things could get better, one step at a time. Amelia's journey wasn't just about repairing the cracks in her family. It was about learning to forgive, not just her children, but herself. It was about realizing that no one, not her, not Ethan, not Sophie, could ever be perfect, and that was okay. What mattered was the effort, the willingness to love and to grow, even when it was hard. And isn't that what we all need? The realization that sometimes the answer is not in fixing what's broken, but in accepting what is, and finding ways to rebuild from there. In life, we often face challenges that feel insurmountable, relationships that seem too damaged to repair, wounds too deep to heal. But what Amelia's story teaches us is that there is always hope. There is always a chance to rebuild, to reconnect, and to heal, if we're willing to put in the work and open our hearts. Healing takes time. It's messy, it's difficult, and sometimes it feels impossible. But every small act of understanding, every moment of patience, every word of forgiveness is a step toward something better. The greatest lesson in Amelia's story is simple. True healing starts with understanding, and it begins with us. With the courage to admit our own imperfections, the willingness to see others for who they truly are, and the strength to embrace love, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. So, if you find yourself in a moment of struggle, whether with family, friends, or even yourself, remember Amelia's journey. Healing doesn't come from perfection, it comes from love, from patience, and from taking that first step, even when you don't have all the answers. If you've learned something from this story, take a moment to reflect. What's one step you can take today to heal the relationships in your life? Remember, the road to healing may not always be clear, but as long as you're willing to walk it with love, understanding, and patience, it's always possible to find your way back to each other. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and sometimes the most important stories are the ones we share together. And remember, healing begins with understanding, and it begins with us. Thank you for joining us in today's story. If you've been touched by Amelia's journey, remember, you're not alone in your struggles. Whether it's family, friendships, or your own personal challenges, healing is possible. It might not always be easy, and it might not happen overnight, but with patience, love, and understanding, we can all take steps toward rebuilding what's been broken. If this story resonated with you, Take a moment to reflect on your own relationships. What's one small step you can take today to heal the bonds in your life? It's never too late to make a change, to show love, or to start rebuilding the connections that matter most. If you haven't already, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you can stay updated on more inspiring stories like this. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might need a reminder that healing is always possible. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below and share your own story or any lessons you've learned along the way. Let's keep the conversation going. You never know how much your words might inspire someone else. Lastly, remember that no matter where you are in your journey, healing starts with understanding. Be kind to yourself and others as we all walk this path together. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon with another powerful story. Until then, take care, and remember to always lead with love and patience.